founder or an entrepreneur. If you wanna take your company value to 300 million, we gon' show you how to do it. Well, we got the roadmap, the aspirations. We'll give you a game plan and strategies. Seize control of your company's destiny today by tuning in to Private Capital Mastery. Yeah. Let's start the show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Private Capital Mastery Podcast and Community. I'm your host, Brian Franco, and today is a special day for me because I had the opportunity to meet with Sandeep Davankar recently, and we had such an amazing conversation in and around small businesses, and therefore we've titled this episode, Emerging Technologies and Investor Confidence, of which Sandeep has a tremendous amount of knowledge and impact and input on. So I'm looking forward to diving into this. Sandeep, thank you for being here with me, and thank you for spending the time here today.
Great, thank you, Brian. Likewise, great first meeting we had, and a lot of topics I know we are aligned on. And I love the topic of this podcast, very relevant to the current marketplace.
Yes.
And I think something that's in the heart of every entrepreneur.
Absolutely. So tell us a little about your background as an entrepreneur, as even an advisor to the federal government, I believe, as well, right? The SBA.
A little bit, yes, the SBA. Yeah. I did work with them in some capacity, running an organization for them. But really, my background is in engineering and technology. So I love that technology, and what I've been able to do is grow into the business side of things. So my background is both engineering and business. Classic 1-2 punch. But we are seeing a lot of that, I think, because that becomes a necessity nowadays.
It does.
And now then you add your bunch of experience, some good, some bad, you get a pretty good idea of what things need to happen in order to be successful.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm doing. My focus nowadays is to try and engineer a good business. There are certain elements of business that are industry agnostic.
Yes.
These are fundamentals applicable to every kind of business, no matter what you do. Very similar to a foundation concept. So that's what I'm doing and enjoying it. I love the ringside view of watching entrepreneurship, which is what America was built on.
Absolutely. And actually is what this podcast was built on as well, because we really are here to focus on founders and entrepreneurs and speaking to them about the private capital markets, becoming masters of those private capital markets so they can learn how to interact with capital, right? Because capital is the fuel that these companies need to propel themselves into the future, whether it's a product, whether it's a service. And to your point, as an engineer and having that engineering mindset, and keep in mind, I work with a lot of engineers from mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, and I love the way an engineer thinks, because there's always a challenge or a problem that has to be solved, right? And you have, as an engineer, what I've seen and observed is you have a specific approach, no matter what the challenge is.
Exactly.
The approach is the same, right?
There are some laws in business, and I would say like gravity in engineering side. There are certain fundamentals that no matter what type of business you do, you have to have those in place. You cannot operate on what is going to be, but what it is and what is it going to take you where you want to go.
It's true. But having that roadmap allows you to have that confidence that you need, going into the markets, going into business, and navigating through the day-to-day challenges, right? And there are challenges, and as you said, as you sit ringside and you see them, and you help solve a lot of those problems that companies have, right? But you really emphasize the importance of getting of small businesses and accessing the capital in our conversations. How about, can you elaborate a little bit on that and share some thoughts there?
A lot of folks, it doesn't have to be engineering, a lot of just regular folks have brilliant ideas. Even folks that go to learn developing ideas have ideas all the time. The challenge is organizing and structuring to deliver and bring that idea to realization. And it takes a different mindset to do that. We used to say that there are entrepreneurs who keep chasing red shiny objects, and the minute they grab one, they're ready to go to the next red shiny objects. And sometimes in my role, I've had to focus these guys and bring them up to a ladder to get it to become a company And sometimes you have to grab them by their hair to pull them up that ladder. So if they can put a process to manage that, they will be in a better shape. But the one common resource that they lack, in addition to just knowing how to organize an idea and get it out, they should focus on that so the ideas become a reality, is capital.
Yes.
The capital is not easy to access. It's available. And there are different sources, as you know, very well know. But one of the most common ones is friends, family, high net worth individuals before they go to the banks. And what I've noticed is a lot of investors who are not banks try to emulate the bank's model in assessing an opportunity or investment. And what entrepreneurs need is that mindset to shift a little bit, where they find investors who have the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yes.
And there's always risk, but they can mitigate the risk by proper planning. Have certain exit points, certain points where they can hold them accountable to see progress, rather than throwing the money in and waiting for a couple of years and say, where is everything? And then the whole drama begins. Right?
Well, yeah, and that's what I always say to folks that are starting a business or looking to raise capital. I mean, if you want friends and family, don't raise money from friends and family, because that really complicates the relationship.
Right.
And a lot of times you find, I mean, if a family member came to me, looking for capital for a business, I mean, of course I'm going to encourage them and want to participate.
Right.
But when you say yes to that, you're really gifting that money.
Exactly.
Because there's really, you talked about what I'll call the underwriting guidelines from investors and banks, and there's a system.
Yes.
There's a system that's been engineered that when you said it's not easy to access capital, I agree with you, but you and I also both know it's not difficult or impossible.
There is capital hunting for good investments.
Yes.
And that's the lost point.
Yes.
And what's happening is, as we get hung up and paralyzed by processes and systems, and by the way, side note, SEC has a great webpage that talks about what to consider before you invest.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good guideline for people to follow. And but when we don't find investors locally, that the entrepreneur is going to be persistent in trying to fund that idea. And so foreign investors come in.
Correct.
And now there's a technology or brain drain in a way, where those ideas are now gone and they make product overseas using those ideas, and we end up buying them. So I see that and say, okay, we had this.
Yes.
So I think it's a paradigm shift to some level.
Of course.
But I think there should be a customized way of setting up a framework to allow investors to participate in an idea, and for the entrepreneurs to get that help to scale and to go out. And some of them may work, some of them may not work.
Correct.
That's just part of the thing.
It's
that's
testing. It's part of the testing,
exactly. And that's a risk they should take intelligently.
Correct. So you talked about the pain of bringing in foreign investors or capital, right? It's not a bad thing, but there is pain points there, and one of those pain points are, as you described, are technologies being replicated or duplicated overseas
or taken away,
right? And so there it comes in a whole conversation in around international trademarks.
It's a series of
yes, it really is a series. But we don't have that much time, right? But I'd love to talk to you about that. But these pain points are real. Bottom line, and capital being part of that. But when you have an investor that wants, let's take your example of a foreign entity investing here in the U.S., right? So that means two things to me. One, well, I've only lived in this country, but I've never considered investing in other countries, but all other countries always consider investing here in the U.S.
Right.
So I have to pay attention to that, right?
Yes.
And number two, when you look at those investments, those foreign investors, and to your point, they're looking for more than just a return on investment. Like when you even look at some of the programs out there that are designed to provide citizenship here in the U.S. There are programs designed for this where you have a fast track way into the
EB-5 program.
EB-5 program, exactly. And so, but those EB-5 investors, when you have conversations with them, the secondary is the investment. The primary is citizenship, right?
Yep.
And so, which is a great program. I've seen it used in powerful ways in a variety of industries. But there's pain there. So you have to be aware of that pain. But what are some of the hurdles entrepreneurs often, have, right, as they're looking at these challenges, and how do they better understand, how to address those challenges so they could overcome them, ultimately to access that capital, right? Because that's what we're talking about, is the capital.
Exactly.
But what pain avoidance antidote do you have for everyone?
Key thing is be aware that your idea itself is not going to walk by itself. It's like a child.
Yeah.
You got to nurture it. You got to surround it with the right impacts, environments for it to be a good adult. And that's what an idea is. It's a baby. It has a gestation period, and in your mind, then you recognize you register a company. Now it's arrived. It has an EIN number, and the EIN number actually is similar to your social security number, right? It's their company's identifier. So it's a person, and you as the founder becomes the caretaker. So you have to nurture it. You have to find where the right investment, nutrition is going to come from. Where is the child going to operate as an adult? Right? So all those factors come into play. So it's not a singular focus to launch a product. It's a more broader exercise to bring all of this together. And during that journey, you need to get the right people involved. Don't try to do it on your own. And then you get the right advice, the right support, and position it for the success of the company. Your success kind of becomes secondary at that point, because now it's an entity by itself. And there are regulations that hold you accountable for misusing and abusing that entity. And you have to be cognizant of that.
You do.
And once that is done, then you'll know what role foreign investment may play. Because once you have a product, then there are manufacturing challenges. Because your investment comes from another country, do you have to have a manufacturing plant there? If you invest as or launch a product in another country, there may be some expectations from the government as creating jobs locally. So all of those factors need to be in account. I was reading an article the other day that talks about how to do business as a Chinese company in the US.
Wow,
Fabulous article.
Yes.
And I said, okay, this can be flipped over and it can work for any company that wants to do overseas business. So I think the opportunities are there. They have to be mindful and deliberate to set up those different requirements to nurture the company to grow. So.
I love when you said, and use the illustration that a business is like a child, right? You establish the EIN. I mean, that's essentially the birthing, right?
Right.
Because when you and I were born into a country like this, you're provided a social security number.
Exactly.
One of the first orders of business, right? And so, but the accountability that goes along with that illustration is so powerful to me, because you said it. You said accountability, because you are essentially developing another being. Now that being, unlike you and I as human beings, an entity, a corporate entity, can outlive and should outlive us, right? Has the ability to outlive us. And that's why the EIN is not our social security number, because it's intended to outlive not only one, but could be generations. So this is the legacy that I love to talk about, right? Because when we think about you're buying a company, you're starting a company, you're building that company to scale, and then there's the exit points that you described, right? But the exit points typically are there for everyone, not just the sole owner or just the founder,
the whole family of that entity can benefit from the right exit, and which has to be part of the plan. It should not be abrupt. And there's a whole story behind that. How do you create a legacy if you want to, right? And there is kind of the purpose of setting up these things, because wealth to me is kind of a little outdated. Generational wealth is the real thing.
I agree.
Right? Because that's why you work till your very old age. And how do you navigate that waters? There are so many different opportunities to do that. And as a business owner, you have to account for all of that. What I've seen, again, to getting to that point of they work so much in the business rather than working on the business, which is when all these ideas come up, and then you can set a pathway to get there. And then another thing I think we talked about is generational thing. A lot of times the children watch their parents struggle building a business, and at the end of the day they want to say, no, I'm not sure I want to go through that. Not all the time, but a lot of times that happens, because they've seen the struggle. And to me, that narrative has to change, because parents, business owners, are partly responsible for that, because they talk about the challenges they have and how it's difficult, how it's not easy. But there are so many good things that happen.
Absolutely.
But if they change that narrative and talk about the successes that they have, that will have a better influence on the next generation to give them confidence and a belief in the entrepreneurial system and the capitalistic approach to things. Right?
Yes.
And I think that's something that every entrepreneur can do.
They could start that now.
Yes.
They could start that today and talk about those successes, because I think what happens sometimes is that, success for some, right? Especially those that are very conservative or very humble, which is not the bad characteristics, but they tend to not talk about those successes, right? But what comes with humility is those stories of pain and late nights and early mornings and everything they put into these companies, right? And which we need to talk about, but to your point, we need to put a cherry on that and say, look, but this is what these sacrifices have created for my family.
Yes.
I've been able to put, for example, I had a client talk about how it was a very touching story, actually. He was saying, I started this company because I missed one Halloween when my daughter was young. It was his first daughter. And he says, I'm never going to allow this to happen again. And so he says, okay, well, how do I do this? He says, I'm going to go into business for myself. And he did. And he went from zero to $30 million of revenue. He's an absolute hero in their industry, right? But his joke was always, I didn't realize becoming an entrepreneur meant that I would continue to miss Halloweens. But then he always ends it with the stories of how he's been able to travel the world with his family and put his daughter through law school and his son's through school as well, and his son's a professional skier now, and all of these things the business has been able to afford this lifestyle for him. Otherwise, he would be, as he described, still an employee working for somebody and missing those Halloweens, with his daughter, right? Yes. But I think that's actionable advice that entrepreneurs could take on today. In building out the culture of entrepreneurs is talk about those successes. Yes, talk about the pain.
They are in control.
They are in control. Absolutely.
Yes. Sometimes that is lost.
So I want to transition to something in the work that we do is capital advisors and M&A advisors. Is that you said it earlier? An entrepreneur will say, "Gosh, it's time for me to sell the company." And there's a variety of reasons why, right? But they always say, they always illustrate it as this is their baby. This is, into your illustration as well. I mean, this is a baby they've nurtured over the years, right? And they developed, and hopefully, like you said, they put good influences in and around that child, right? That business. But one challenge I see in part of this journey that we go down when we're pursuing an M&A transaction or a liquidity event is the separation, right? Emotional, physical separation from that founder of the business. I'm very curious. I mean, in your planning as an engineer, right? And then with that mindset, it doesn't need to be as emotionally driven decision as I think we make it. Do you agree with that?
I agree. And to me, it's part of the planning process.
Yes.
So it minimizes the abruptness of it when it's time.
Yes.
Just like any critical event in life, you plan for it so you know it's coming, and you can position again, structure it so that you continue to be a part of it if you want to. You can be an advisor, a board member, and slowly ease off when you've had enough and seen that it's going. It's like marrying off the child.
It is.
Right?
It is.
Son or daughter, that time comes at a certain age or certain point in time, and you have to accept that and support it no matter what. The legacy of being a founder does never change. It'll always be recognized no matter what the M&A results in.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll have a history.
There'll be a history.
And I know you were talking about creating AI type memories of things.
Yes.
That's another thing that you can have a whole journey of a company, how it came to be, and it will be in whatever the future of that journey or company looks like.
Yeah, similar to character.AI is a website that's out there.
And then that is a very difficult, I'll give you a perspective not from a business standpoint, but from a technology standpoint. We were building a waste to energy system for a company. And the developer of that was reluctant to give us all the information that was needed to manufacture and build it. Wait a second. And I had several conversations, but one was a pretty late night discussion. And I said, you have to give us this information because everything is on hold until this information. And he goes, I can't, Sandeep, it's my baby. And they had 60 patents on it.
Wow.
And so I could understand that, but unless he did that, you can't take this thing on the road and showcase it, right?
Yep.
And we talked literally 3 hours of what went into developing this and how it was challenged. And I said, what would you want me to do to help you realize that this is okay?
Okay.
And I was in this same suit and I said, I want to cut your tie. I said, what? I said, is that symbolic? He goes, yeah, maybe. I said, sure. I got 6 and I said, we had all the plans next day, and of course it went on, and they're big now. They are actually implementing this system worldwide.
Wow.
But these things happen, so that attachment, it's only the owner and maybe sometimes the immediate family can decide that. But they have to take that upon themselves to understand that that's coming. If we were eternal beings, that would not be necessary, but the company can be eternal, right?
That's right.
Unless there's some action that actually terminates it. So,
and that's the wisdom that comes along with being an entrepreneur for decades, right? Is that they realize that the business could outlive them, right? And I always appreciate when an entrepreneur says to me, Brian, I'm looking to sell my company because I can't take it beyond where it is. I've been stuck at this revenue.
That's brilliant. That's actually
it's very insightful.
And the classic example is, of course, eBay.
Yes.
When the founder said, I need, and I forget, Meg Whitman to take it to the next level. If that realization is embedded into the thinking up front, then they know this is where I'm going to need help.
Yes.
And then grow and realize the broader thing. That's another challenge, actually, if I may touch on that.
Please.
A lot of business owners, it's a one-person show initially.
Yeah.
And they have to also find out when is the time to delegate responsibility. And sometimes it becomes a matter of being able to support it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But that's a growth opportunity, which is an easier sell to investors. That I'm growing, I need capital, use of funds is this. And that's a good thing because that also prevents them from working in the business versus on it.
Correct.
And they need to have that confidence. Not everybody is going to be right away. First time they will make mistakes. Some things may be off. But that's manageable versus burning out and trying to do it all by yourself and then being constrained in growth.
That's right.
But open it up. SBA loves when a business creates opportunities.
Absolutely.
They fund it. One big thing, if I may throw that out, the CHIPS Act, it's coming, it's here.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm working to set up a consortium of businesses to help understand how that works and get the government to kind of help facilitate the information.
Yes.
So that it attracts more opportunities for businesses.
Absolutely. So we talked about the need of capital being the fuel for that business. We've talked about the pains associated with we talked about specifically foreign investment, right? But you just touched on the possibility of domestic investment by specifically the SBA and the work that they're doing to share with entrepreneurs and business owners of what's available out there in terms of not only capital but opportunity, right? Talk to me about that for a moment in terms of how did you approach that? How did you approach that challenge in terms of how do we get entrepreneurs to understand?
I think
this opportunity.
A lot of entrepreneurs shy away from SBA or federal government because of their mindset. There's a lot of paperwork involved. But if you bought a house, the paperwork that's associated with it.
Great point.
And the good point is if you have done it once, it's in the system and it stays.
Yes.
And I think the government, with all its inefficiencies, has sparked a lot of innovation over the years. And there are a lot of programs that facilitate technology development, business development, and it gives opportunity and broadens it. A lot of times people also think, SBA means only for people that are minority and things, but it's not. It's for ideas.
Yes.
It has a very broad spectrum.
It does. And
people need to participate in it. It's our taxpayer dollars that is funding all these things in a way.
That's right.
And so might as well use it.
Yes.
And it's a process-driven system because the government stakeholders are the people.
That's right.
Right? The banks have the shareholders, the government has all of that plus the people.
Yes.
So that's why there's a lot of paperwork associated with it.
There is.
And once you embrace that and understand it a little bit, then there are several opportunities, and it strengthens, I think, the protection of our technologies also to some level.
Where does one, find out more about these programs, loan programs, and where have you directed them in the past?
I would, every agency, the government has multiple agencies, so every agency has their own small business initiative.
Okay.
And so I think I would encourage them, whichever DOE, Department of Energy, go to their website and they list it all. They're very open, transparent about things. And there's a process, there's a person associated with it to guide you.
Yes.
And not a lot of people do it. I mean, Bechtels of the world, since you engineering construction, they rose to their thing by this because of the government. A lot of these companies, Floor Daniel, all of these guys have elevated themselves using those mechanisms, right? But one thing the listeners or viewers need to know, every large business you see, Google, Microsoft, Apple, they were all once a small business.
They were all baby.
They went through the birthing, they went through the gestation, the teenage years, the toddler years, the whole 9 yards, right? So we always tend to look at businesses as they are today. When I look at a business, I look at that journey and say, oh my God, Google is doing great, and here's what they went through.
You're exactly
Apple, right?
No, you're 100% right, and that's why I love that illustration, that you mentioned earlier, because it really speaks to that journey and how business will grow and develop. And I think about my children and how ultimately, if I don't put good influences around them, right, including myself and my wife, right, we're creating an environment for them.
Right.
And I've never ever thought about my business that way, right? Now not consciously, subconsciously, yes, right? But I think that's great actionable advice that you've provided today, and I kind of want to bring that to a conclusion, because you talked about the Department of Energy, the SBA. There's programs that are funded out there to help entrepreneurs succeed in this country, right? And there's entrepreneurs are they're looking at this as if it's the tallest mountain peak they've ever seen, and they're thinking, how do I make it up that? And so, but knowing that there's resources there, you have to choose your own adventure. How do you get there? Where are you today? And build that pathway, because to your point, the roadmaps are there. The Google Maps to entrepreneurs is there.
Well said. I agree.
You just have to access it.
Yes.
Plug in your intended destination, right? And work day after day after day towards that.
Love that analogy. That's something they should create, an AI-based development of a map.
Well, maybe you and I could do that.
We could. And I'm a big believer that the best is yet to come. I reject this doom and gloom concept.
Yes.
I embrace the fact that the millennials and Gen Z, whoever they are, they're going to make a phenomenal advancement in human, and we all are going to miss being part of it. It's going to be amazing.
It is going to be, and it already is amazing, because there's a lot of conversation around AI and technology replacing humans, and I say over and over again, that it's there to equip us, it's there to make us more efficient, and when you're doing that, you find yourself in a place where, as a human being, right, you're more accomplished, because you're collapsing time essentially. Because that's how I look at AI. It's a time machine, right?
Yes.
This is why Microsoft was so successful.
Exactly.
Right, because when you think about Microsoft, they created a Windows platform and Excel and all the Office tools that we utilize. But the reality is, prior to that, there was a typewriter.
Yes.
Right. Prior to that.
Absolutely.
And the world was very different. It moved very slow, right? But it's kind of funny, because I even tell my kids, when I was a kid, I didn't have a cell phone. They didn't have cell phones, at least the consumers, right? And so, but the advancement, and I always remind them, the technology that they have in their hands and their cell phone is more technology than the first space shuttle launching into space had, right? And it's hard to believe, right?
Yes.
But I mean, the computing power of these machines are incredible. But I agree with you. I think if we utilize technology, including AI, in a way to equip us as entrepreneurs, we're going to collapse time. We're going to return to destination faster. And if we do that, that means we have more meaningful life, human life here on Earth, to then enjoy those things that we pursued, or our goals, our intentions, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. AI in itself, people don't need to be amazed by it too much. It's essentially right now It's a connection of databases faster
Yes.
than humans can.
Yeah.
There's no magic in there. It's
Yeah.
just relational
Yeah.
databases connected to act faster than a human mind can.
Yes.
And
Yes.
lead to. So if your database is wrong, you may have a problem. You have a problem. So-
Bad data in is bad data
Yes,
out, right? We
exactly.
talked about this a lot
Exactly.
too. But well, look, I think the illustrations you provided were very insightful, very helpful. Me included. I mean, I'm going to use the baby illustration
Please do.
and analogy. I think that's fantastic. But I think that as we continue as entrepreneurs down this journey, and we look at all the things that you shared today, I'd love to have. Give folks the opportunity to reach out to you if that's okay,
Sure, absolutely.
and perhaps you can help somebody along their way in their journey as an entrepreneur and developing their company, and who knows, maybe we will see the next Google or
Yes.
the next Apple, as you described, right?
Yes.
And it just comes down to having that playbook, having
Exactly.
that roadmap.
Absolutely.
And if you have it, and the turn-by-turn directions are there, it's still a journey.
Exactly.
It's not,
Somebody has to drive.
Someone's got to drive,
Yes.
right? And eventually
Or at
AI
least
will
sit in the
drive.
car to program the code.
But then you could multitask, right?
Exactly. Exactly. The future is bright. It's very exciting.
It is. Well, Sandeep, I really appreciate you spending the time with me, sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your experiences, and I continue to be a fan of you and the work that you've done and you continue to do. I'd love to stay in connected with you, and let's create that roadmap
Likewise.
together. All right.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for giving me the platform to share the ideas.
Absolutely. And thank you for participating and listening in to this episode. We hope it was thought-provoking. We hope that we provoke something in your mind that you just haven't thought about before, and you take that and you take an action so that you can implement that into your business and into your journey so that you reach your final and intended destination. Until then, we look forward to seeing you on next week's episode. I'm Brian Franco, and this has been another episode of the Private Capital Mastery Podcast and Community. We'll see you soon.